how do you see the role of officers, legal, planning and governance in preparing for and at planning committees? And if you've having been chairs in the past, does your view of the role of officers change?
I've no doubt that officers are a key part of the planning process and crucial to ensure the smooth running of the committee meeting itself and all the preparations for it, which members often take a little for granted. And certainly once you become chairman, you come to appreciate their role even more. And I certainly saw them as an essential part of the whole process and in a slightly different light. I feel that the hard work they put in to make it the best possible experience for everyone involved, including members, applicants, and of course the public. Their job is not an easy one, particularly if members have strong views that oppose their own. So I think they do very well.
Okay, Bill.
Thanks. I think the success of any planning committee depends on a mutual trust and regard between councillors and officers. We both have very different but very vital roles in planning committee meetings. Officers are essential for that professional oversight, both in terms of planning knowledge and governance, but we're there as councillors to give the all-important democratic accountability to the public, people who elect us. And those two roles for me go hand in hand. I think we need to respect officers' independence and their ability, and officers in return need to respect our democratic mandates. When that relationship breaks down, the success of the committee breaks down as well. So I've always sought to foster very, very good and positive relations between officers and councillors. And Linda's quite right, when you become chair of the planning committee, you get to see the work behind the scenes, the preparatory work that most committee members never get to see. And it's made me appreciate our officers all the more seeing that. I think that we do need to maintain that balance, though, that we are a political committee, albeit not a party political committee. And sometimes explaining that to officers can be a little bit difficult. But the best officers I've worked with are those that understand our role and understand the restrictions and the pressures that politicians come under. I've always sought to maintain a dialogue with officers when I was chair and meet with them right down to ordinary case officers to explain our roles, to have Q&A sessions with my vice chairs so that we break down those barriers. There's nothing more frustrating if you're an officer than seeing a recommendation you've put weeks, if not months in, overturned like that by a group of people with no planning qualifications between them. But that's democracy, that's how local government works, and understanding that and showing empathy on both sides makes for good relations, and that's something I've always tried to foster and would encourage other people to do the same.
Okay, and if there are times when you have significant questions or do even disagree with officers' recommendations and think that an alternative recommendation or decision is justified, how do you approach this, both from a perspective before committee starts and during committee?
On controversial applications, I'll always alert the officer that I'm not happy with their decision well in advance of the meeting and preferably before their recommendation is published. On minors, it's often the reason that you're calling it to committee as the local member, so they get a clue then. And often further conversations with them bring out new, previously unknown reasons for this. And in my experience, officers always appreciate that and may be willing to offer a compromise or give some possible sound planning reasons to support your decision. We all hate the moment when a councillor stands up and says, I propose refusal, and the officers say, and your reasons are, and there's this deathly silence. So whilst you don't want to be sort of prejudging it before you've heard the whole of the committee, a good officer will give you some reasons if it's going strongly against planning policy, and you've then got to look for reasons to override that, which are often difficult. They don't like, that no surprises really. We call it rabbits in hats, and it rarely plays out well. And officers, it needs to be remembered, they're not your enemy. They're professionals carrying out their jobs. And as Bill has previously said, they deserve our respect, even if we don't disagree with them. And finally, and I think this is an important one, when the meeting's over, leave any feelings of animosity behind, even if it didn't go as you hoped. That's those officers' job. They've got to come back in the next day, and it's not for us to abuse them in any way, verbally particularly.
Thank you, Linda. Bill.
Yeah, this is one of the most tricky parts of being a planning committee member. The easy ones are the times that you agree with the officer recommendation. When you disagree, then it's important that it plays out correctly and professionally. The common mistake I see quite a lot is that people think their role as a planning committee member begins when the chair brings the meeting to order and says welcome. It actually begins a lot earlier than that, when you receive the papers and you go through them and you tease out, you tease out any questions that you might have, anything that's not quite right, anything you're not happy with. And a good planning committee member will often contact the case officer or the head of department in advance to say, I'm a bit worried about the height of this building or the traffic implications or whatever it might be. There's absolutely no harm in that. Actually, it's very good practice to get as much information as you can before the meeting and the debate actually starts. If you are minded to vote against an officer recommendation, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. If we couldn't do that, planning committees wouldn't exist. So don't be afraid to do that. But remember, it needs to be on planning reasons only. Saying, I don't like it is not good enough. And indeed, if that's what you're thinking, maybe you're not trained properly to be on your planning committee. You should be aware that it is material planning, considerations only. A good chair will be able to follow the debate almost like a sports commentator and know what's coming next, or be able to predict what's coming next. So if a debate seems to be heading in the direction of overturning an officer recommendation, the chair should say that seems to be where we're heading. Are people okay with putting forward some reasons first? Now, it's not the planning committee member's job to know the exact paragraph and subsection of their local plan that height or massing or historic considerations fall under. That's the officer's job to reference the exact page and paragraph number, but it is the planning committee member's job to put forward the material considerations that are relevant. And a good officer will understand that councillors can, with good reason, overturn their recommendations, and a good councillor will understand that officers are coming to this from a totally neutral perspective, and that neutrality and professionalism needs to be respected. So it is one of the tricky bits, but if it's handled correctly, it should run smoothly, and it should be clear to the watching public what's going on. So respect and understanding on both sides, and you'll get there.
Okay, thank you, Bill. And finally, Bill, the piece of advice question. As a venerable planning committee member with sound judgment, what is your single piece of advice that your peers across the country aspiring to be the best planning committee member they can be? What is that piece of advice you'd like to give them tonight?
I think in this area, it's remembering that officers aren't there because they're promoting or have an interest in a particular application. They're there to put their professional planning judgment forward. They are totally neutral, or they should be if the system is working well, which it does in my experience all over the country. They're there to put their neutral judgment on it. Your judgment might not coincide with theirs, but please remember, they're not there because they've got an interest or they're promoting the development. They're there just to give their opinion, which may be the same as yours or may not be the same as yours. But understand their role respect their role, respect their professionalism, and you'll get plenty of respect for your democratic accountability in return.
Okay, thank you very much both. That's been very illuminating, and I look forward to seeing you again very shortly. Thank you, and I hope everyone has learnt and heard and benefited from that. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks.